All right, friends, welcome back to what you all have been anticipating and asked for. And no, you dirty minds, not a summer wet t-shirt contest. Although I'm not saying it's off the table if you're not. No, even better is part 2 with Kelsey Formost. You are going to love this. We just go there and, like Hollywood's tendency to keep apologizing for shit, I just couldn't stop. So here we go. Part 2, Kelsey Formost. Let it roll. You are writing this memoir. So I'm curious, with everything you're saying right now, even though you've stepped out of the business, like, that the reach that it has, like I mentioned Disney before, and these fuckers still I sleep with one eye open. Right. So is there a part of you that is finding yourself holding back writing your memoir almost in fear of people in Hollywood judging you, isolating you, even though you're not in it anymore, or canceling you, so to speak, right? Like, do you find yourself checking yourself being like, do I put all this in there? Because their reach is so immense.
I don't. I really don't. Because
good for you. You shouldn't. For what? Again, for what?
Well, yeah, exactly. For what? And here's why. The memoir is about my personal experience, and I know my personal experience. I know what happened to me, and I've done a lot of work really acknowledging in the first place, like, this was abusive. It was abusive. And I think the reason I'm really not scared is because a lot of the stories I'm telling, they aren't gonna be the giant Harvey Weinstein reveals.
Talk to me about some of those things where you're like, it wouldn't necessarily be as explosive or big, but it's not right.
Yeah. I mean, immediately a story comes to mind of this happened to a friend, not to me, but we, again, in a Starbucks, she's beautiful, beautiful woman. And we're the same age, and someone came up to her and was like, are you an actor or are you a model? And she was both. And she said yes. And he was like, I have an agency. Like, can I buy your coffee? And can I chat with you for a minute? Like, no problem. And it was very, very much meek, nice guy energy. Right. So she says, okay, she has some time. And they sit down, they're across from each other, again, seemingly very safe. They talk for 10 minutes or so. It seems, again, very normal. He gives her his card. They exchange numbers. And then he says, I know I'm not supposed to ask this, but how old are you? And she answers him, and he says, oh, okay. So you need to start really wearing the sunscreen. And she was like, I'm sorry. He goes, skin damage, wrinkles and stuff. And she was like, oh, right. And he takes his hand and he reaches across the table and he puts his palm on her, on her chest, over her heart.
I'm gagging.
Yeah. And he just goes, especially here, you need to protect here. And then he takes his hand away and he says, thank you so much for coffee. I hope you reach out. And so she's just left sitting there in this Starbucks, like, what the fuck was that? He didn't touch her breast. He just laid his hand on her heart, on her chest. But it was so jarring and it was so weird. And it was very clear that she had just been taken advantage of. But what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Say this guy put his hand on my heart. Okay. Do you want to press charges? Can you press charges? What does that look like? Right.
You're left feeling, what's the word?
Violated.
You're left feeling violated. And I attribute so much to this, to these almost, I don't know how else to put it, but these insecure loser scumbags, who treats a woman like that? Right. And it's they think that it's Hollywood and it's cool and you can't. Exactly.
Cause who's going to report that? Again, there's no framework. There's no framework. There's no, and also he got up and left. So in the moment, and this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about. I feel like we're only given the example of someone who like really immediately loudly says, no, like fuck off. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone who's like meek and like shy and, you know, just takes it. Right. We're only sort of given those two examples a lot of the times, but there's a huge spectrum in between. And what isn't talked about a lot, and I'm sure you've experienced it, I've certainly experienced it, where in the immediate aftermath, your body, like your nervous system takes over, and biologically, like you don't control what happens. And most of us freeze. Most of us are like, this input is not input that I'm used to. I don't know how to handle this man's hand on my chest. And then when he leaves, you're like, should I have said something? Like, what the fuck was that? And you're just left with the feeling of, and I remember that to this day. That story was like, that didn't even happen to me. And it happened like 8 years ago. And I still remember it and feel disgusting when I hear it. Right. Like, it stays with you.
And it's because you talk about it being, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've experienced it to such an extent. I know I joked about it, but I really think my resting bitch face from Born and Bred in the tri-state has done wonders, because I'm like, just please don't come in a 10-foot fucking radius of me. But that's where it does get. I had, I don't know if you've heard of her, Alexis Lemire. I had her on my show. I believe she was on a Netflix show too, but she's big up and coming actress. And we talked about the desperation, and you and I talked about it earlier, like the desperation of being in this business. And that's where it's not so black and white, because if you have instances like these, again, where it's not so big that you report it, but it's also, it's that thing where you're so desperate, like you're working a side waitress job, you're doing this, you're on the grind, you're working in a Starbucks. And so you'll take any little shot you can get. And even if it's like someone like, you know, again, there's a line where you're like, no, I'm not going to deal with this scumbag. I'll find another way. But there's also like a part where you're like, again, it's like that, do what it takes. And I don't want to, this might be it. This might be my thing. So do I just shut up and take it? And again, you know, someone being like, you know, you got to suck my dick for this role again, you know, beyond, you know, abhorrent, but it's that idea where it gets very gray, because you don't know who they know, who they're connected to, if they can block you from other opportunities, if it's your ticket of this, and that's where it gets really fucked up.
It does. It does. And the other thing too, that I think about a lot, probably more than I should, but I don't know the answer, is what happens to all of the audition footage, right? Like, I'm thinking about in particular a moment where I did walk out of something. I walked out of an audition because the sides changed, the script changed, and I saw something buried in the script that I didn't initially see. And I got a call back for this role. And without like getting too in the weeds, it was for a very well-known horror franchise. And it was for a part that seemed like really fun and juicy and cool. And I'd never done anything like that before. And the initial audition went great. And then I got the sides for the callback, and there was a mention of anal sex and having to talk about liking it and stuff. And I thought, like, okay, that's not at all what the character was represented as in the beginning of this. Like, I would not have gone in for this initial audition if I had known this about this character and having to do this on a set. Like, this is not going to be something that I want to live on in perpetuity. That's just my personal desire. So I tell my agent, I'm not going to go in for this callback because of this line and this part of the role. I'm not famous enough to have control over them changing the script. So I'm just not going to go in for the callback. And he was so mad at me. And he was like, this is a huge casting office. This is a huge franchise. Like, you could really be burning a serious bridge here. Like, I put my neck out for you, getting you this initial audition, and they want you back, and you're saying no. And it was really like that, again, that feeling of powerlessness, but also just being like, I'm never going to be okay saying this, especially on camera. And then I was like, way later, I was like, what happens to all of the footage of all of the girls who don't get the part, who come in and are saying these lines really convincingly, and they've got them on camera? Like, what happens to that footage? Who gets that? Who's entrusted to delete that hard drive?
Nobody.
Right?
I think that speaks to so many things. Number one, like the gratuitousness. Like, I'm all about, I mean, I was in Playboy, for crying out loud. Like, I'm all about sexual freedom, but like, why do we need to be hearing about anal sex in a horror movie? Like, that's number one. Number two, like, what is the reason, right? Number two is, you bring up a really good point, which is not only like the people on the set who could get you the, you know, but like the representation. And then say you're like, no, I don't want to do it. Then you have to go find another rep. Do you know how hard it is? So hard, guys, to like, it goes really deep, right?
The consequences are very real. They are very, very real.
So you said, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I didn't go.
And then what ended up happening with the rep?
I never got called in by that casting office ever again.
The casting office, yeah.
And my rep, I didn't get auditions for a while. And then not a while, not like a super long time, but a different casting director who knew me and loved me wanted me specifically to come in for a different role. And then I was back in my agent's good graces. But it was it was an exercise that I'm really grateful to have had, because I saw like, there was a consequence. Yeah, I didn't work for a few months. I didn't have any opportunities for a few months because of that decision. But what was the alternative? Right? Like, at what cost?
You know,
at what cost?
It's sad, because I always, you know, tell myself, even when I hear stories, or if I think back when I was starting out, putting myself in these positions, and I always tell myself, like, it's not worth it. Walk away. And it's sad and it's shitty that it even has to be that way.
Right.
But I always told myself, like, the right thing that will respect me and my integrity and what I'm trying to do, that will come in the way it's supposed to come and how it's meant to be. And again, it's shitty because it shouldn't even have to be that way. Right? Like, it should be that all the time. It shouldn't be, if I put my foot down to this person, because again, it's like, this could be my break. This could be it. That'll be it then. It's just, it shouldn't be that way. But I've always, even to this day, as a 31-year-old, I'm like, you know what? Like, the right people at the right time and the right path will respect, my ethics and what I'm about, period.
Right. Well, and the other thing I want to mention is, it's not like I flew off the handle and went crazy and was like, why the fuck did you get me this? I was disgustingly polite. Right. I was so apologetic. I was like, I completely understand that you put yourself out there and got me this audition for this huge franchise. Like, I'm so grateful and I'm so sorry. And I still got treated like that. Right. So the point that what I'm trying to say there is, like, it has nothing to do with the person saying no, and everything to do with people feeling powerless. Right. Like, it comes back to, I'm sure that my agent felt powerless.
I was just going to say that even the casting people, like, their desperation of being like, well, Kelsey, if you turn this down, we work so hard for it, they're not going to work with us. Like, everybody's desperate and looking for them out for themselves. That's it.
Right. And you know, what's so ironic too, Taylor, is that, like, the actors who are most sought after are the ones who actually are above it a little bit, and who are like, can be choosy, and who decide to be choosy, and who are like, I'm not going in for that. Or like, this is interesting.
But does that, well, first of all, this is a twofold. Number one, do you think that male actors are in the same predicament? Like, if they're like, fuck no, I'm not doing that, would they get the same treatment? And to your point just now, do you think that only goes for like the vets or people who have been in it? Or even if you're up and coming, like, there's power in being like, no, I'm not going to do that.
I think there's always power in saying no when it doesn't align with who you are. I think that because what that does is you present in a completely different way. Let's get super hippie woo woo LA for a moment. The energy you walk into a room with absolutely affects what opportunities come your way. If you're coming in from a place of desperation and like smallness, then you will be perceived as desperate and small and someone who can be taken advantage of. If you come in with I don't need this, but like, you would be lucky to have me, it's a very different room. It's a very different feeling, and you get treated differently, like completely.
It takes time. I've even noticed it. I mean, I've been on the entrepreneurial grind. Before my podcast, I had my own site, Talk to Me Taylor, where I interviewed celebrities. Same idea as this, about kind of out of the box, irreverent, really going there. And it's funny, Kelsey, because we get rejected all the time, in this business. And I used to be crushed when, I got turned down, or I pitched a, celeb to interview and they were like, no, not this time. And it's a process, and it's not overnight what you're talking about.
You're so right.
So night and day. Like now I'm like, okay, fuck it. You're lost. And I sincerely mean that. And it's just like that, take it or leave it. And it gives you such a power. Cause I used to be that desperate person. And even now in meetings, like I'll find myself when I pitch my show and try to sell it, and I have to really check that back. I don't know if that's a woman thing, an entrepreneurial thing, a show business thing, but really checking that back and being like, having that confidence and being like, you know what, not your loss. And there's, and you notice how people react. There's just a different air about you.
There's also, I think there's wisdom that comes with age. I think that like at this point in my life, I have walked away so many times from identities, industries, specific jobs, relationships, living situations. I have had so much practice that now it's like second nature, where I'm like, this is no longer in alignment with where I want to be and what I want to do and who I am. So I either change the situation or I leave the situation. And that is always within our power, right? Like that ball is always in our court. And I think that is the difference between Kelsey 5 years ago and Kelsey today. Kelsey 5 years ago was like, why is this happening to me? Why is everyone like against me? Or why can't I catch this break? Why is that
victim mentality? I talk about it constantly. Yeah.
And it really took this is, as Taylor said, it takes time and practice and energy and a lot of like watching of TED Talks on YouTube ad nauseum for a year to like really understand and really start that journey of like, okay, my job is not my identity, even if it is really important to me, even if I am really passionate about it. I was very lucky to find a second career that really fulfilled me in the same artistic way that acting used to fulfill me. And it was only when I got really specific about, okay, why did I start acting as a career in the first place? What was that magic spark that really like made me feel alive? And that's gone now. Like that's no longer acting for me. So how do I get that back? Oh, I don't miss it at all. I don't miss it at all. But here's what I do miss. I miss the creative camaraderie of being on set. I miss like people coming together to make something. And then with film in particular, getting to actually see the result is really, really cool. And I miss that. I miss sometimes the actual work, but what people don't understand unless they're in the business is the actual work is maybe 1% of your job. 99% is marketing yourself, getting your reps, following up on like what casting directors are doing, what shows am I right for? What's my type? How do I break out of my type? Can I get this commercial because I need to feed myself and pay my rent? What is the union doing right now? Non-union commercials are the thing now because union commercials aren't paying what they used to. Like there's so many other aspects of being a professional actor that have nothing to do with acting. And so if you can, like, that's not to say that every person who wants to be a professional actor shouldn't be a professional actor. That is not what I'm saying. Like what I'm saying is get your mind right, get your soul right. so that when you walk into those rooms and you do have those opportunities that you've made for yourself, you're coming in from a place of power, not from a place of desperation.
Because it'll chew you up and spit you out, period.
Yeah.
Like this whole business. Back to men, you know, your former male colleagues, would you see them say, again, it was a thing where they were just like, I'm not having this in a script. I'm not doing this. Do you think they would get the same treatment?
That is a really interesting question that I kind of don't know how to answer because I am not a man.
Right.
But what I will say is I absolutely see the desperation of male actors and male colleagues. And one area where I think there is so much growth still to be done in Hollywood is men in particular being comfortable letting their sexuality be public if they are not cis hetero. Here's what I mean by that. There is still so much work to be done with embracing male actors who are gay, male actors who are just anything other than white, straight male, and bringing them in for roles that are the romantic lead, that are like, you know, the more traditional parts instead of typecasting them into like the gay best friend or whatever, because I think that I still think there's so much work to be done there. And that's what really comes to the forefront of my mind when you ask me that question.
That's really interesting because I actually just found out, I don't know if you know this, but the lead of this season of Bridgerton, why is Netflix like genuinely taking over the world? I'm concerned. He's gay in real life. Right.
Yes, exactly. And that is, no idea. That's a really positive thing. And I'm really glad that that conversation's being had. And my hope is that that becomes so common, we don't even have to talk about it. Do you know what I mean?
Like, here's a question for you, because the reason I know this is because I did a live stream with my friends over at the Ivory Tower Boiler. They have a great podcast. The lead, Andrew, is gay and amazing. And we talked about this. And he's the one who told me he's gay in real life. I'm like, no way. And here's the interesting thing though. We kind of both acknowledged that gay men and straight women on screen, there's almost like a little bit of that chemistry missing. And it's like, how much can you fake that? Like if you are a guy attracted to guys, like how much acting can convince us like the women, like that chemistry? So that's what's interesting, because I'm like, he even acknowledged, he's like, yeah, it's like really not quite the same. Like something is just like missing there that's not coming through on the screen. So I don't know how you feel about that, but
I disagree. Here's why. I watched that second season of Bridgerton. It was fucking great. I loved watching that guy.
The tension, the chemistry.
Oh yeah. And also season 1, he had a great through line with the like opera girl, whatever.
Yeah, I did not know he was gay in real life there.
Well, yes. So my point is, if you did not know that he was gay and was attracted to men, would you have had the same experience watching it? Right? Because to me, like I didn't know watching that whole first season. And I thought, oh my God, that guy is so hot. That relationship is so hot. These sex scenes are so hot. Yeah. And ditto season 2 when he was the lead. Oh my God, he's so captivating on screen. And it's not just about like,
he is
it's not just about the sex here. It's about like him building this character and the tension and like wanting to be that like older son and all of these amazing things that I'm sure he could draw on his experience as a gay man and feeling like he wanted to perform and like be the man of the house, right? Like his performance was probably positively informed by his experience as a gay man. And it's only after we know he's gay that I've heard people start to say, well, I don't know if I believe like the. But all of season 1, everyone was obsessed with this dude. So
you're like, your panties are all excited season 1, people. think I might just have a bad gaydar because I have people like in the business because I wouldn't know. And I have people in the business, gay, straight. They're like, no, you can just tell, like, they don't have eyes for a lady. They would, like, you could just tell because you are who you are and you're attracted to who you're attracted to. So maybe my gaydar is off, but with that said, and then before I pivot lastly to like the clusterfuck that is womanhood right now, this idea that we've played with in the last kind of segment of, human nature, play, sexuality, being attracted, and when you draw a line and when it's not okay. So Entourage is coming back. I don't know if you watch Entourage. I love Entourage. When I heard that it was coming back last year in some way, shape, or form, I did an episode talking about it because people claim that it's so misogynistic. And I kind of claim, you know what? It's guys being guys. They love and sexualize and objectify women. Like, it's what they do. It's how from teen years, their brains are wired. If they're not hurting anybody and just kind of being guys, let them live. It's what they do. Right. So your thoughts on that, seeing as how, like, I'm curious to see how it comes back. And if they like are cognizant and try to be all PC about it now, but again, your thoughts on human nature and the fun and the play versus like drawing a line.
Well, it's a little difficult for me to speak to this because I've never seen Entourage. And I don't really have a baseline understanding even of what this show is. So if it's okay with you, I'll just pivot a little bit and talk about a show with a similar criticism, which is Mad Men. Okay. So this is my thinking on art and showing a part of society that needs to be worked on, perhaps. I believe so. Okay. Back to Mad Men specifically. I was obsessed with it when it came out. I thought it was like the best show ever. I thought Don Draper was one of the most interesting anti-heroes. I was obsessed with Peggy Olsen. Like, I was just like, this show is genius. It's one of the best shows ever made. Right. And that was back in 2009, 10, somewhere around there. So over 10 years ago. Right. And that show lasted, I think, 5 seasons or something. And I was obsessed with it the whole time. Cut to 2020 pandemic times. We're all starting to rewatch some old favorites. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and watch Mad Men. And I turn it on and I'm like, holy shit, this is really rough on women. And there are a lot of affairs. And I like knew it when I was watching it at the time when they made it. And now I'm watching.
I was going to say, is part of it, I only watched the pilot. So guilty, like we're flipped.
Guilty of the same thing.
Yes. But was part of it like exploiting and shining a light on how shitty women were treated at the time?
So that is my exact point, is like, when a show is made, we have to remember that it is going to be a product of its time. When a movie is made also, like, and there is great opportunity to have shows be a teaching moment. And what's really, really cool is when time passes and society hopefully has evolved and we go back and we see these shows, now we feel uncomfortable. And the beauty is, oh, I now feel uncomfortable. I'm going to sit in this uncomfortable feeling because now I understand that this
wouldn't fly.
Yeah. Like, this is not good. But at the same time, like, our thinking changes, like time there. I think of this with books too. Like, sometimes people say things in books that they, 10 years down the road are like, fuck, I shouldn't have said that way. But it's like a time capsule. Right.
Yes.
So with Entourage, I don't know what the new show is going to be. I don't know what the old show was, but I do know that the old show, from what I hear from people who were watching it and absorbing it, and a lot of people loved that show, I think it is the same. I think it's a time capsule.
Yeah.
And I think different people will react to it in different ways, and it might be triggering for some, and it might make some people think differently about their own behavior, or I don't know what's going to be.
I love your book. I love your book point, because that is something that really grinds my gears. Obviously, the nature of my show is this whole like book burning we're doing now, with on both sides of the aisle, on all sides, like prohibiting this and not allowing classic books to be taught in school. And it's your point. It's like, that's what she rolled her eyes, right? It's like, this is what it was at the time. It doesn't serve us erasing history, people. Like, correct. Give me a break. And that drives me nuts. Like, even like on Amazon, Target, they'll get rid of books. We're hearing schools, politicians. I mean, it's out of control. It's disgusting.
It is out of control. And here's the thing is like, we're erasing teaching moments. Yeah, right.
It's
like
what was.
You can't put blinders on and whitewash things and just Disneyfy everything. I mean, bringing it back to Disney, but like, you can't present, especially children and young minds, with a world where we're just like, don't look over there. Don't look over there. Like, that's not okay. No. You need to teach the bad things that have happened in order for those bad things to not repeat themselves. Like, you have to. And when it comes to like canceling someone, just, theme of that show, for something that they said 10 years ago in a tweet, like, yes, sometimes they deserve it. Sometimes it is so horrifying what someone said that they need to be held accountable for the thing. However, I think there are a lot of times where we need to treat things that people say publicly as the time capsule that they are, and to use it as a teaching moment and a learning moment and a opportunity for accountability and change, instead of let's just completely erase it and act like it never happened and pretend that that person just never was born. Like, it's
I think, one of my recent guests said this. We were talking about Morgan Wallen, the country singer, and she put it so eloquently and so beautifully, but it's that idea of like, again, if it's abhorrent and it's not okay to society, it's not okay, period. But at what point is it like, if they offer something, they make a human error and they offer something, they're an artist and creative, and they offer something beautiful to the world, let them perform, let them sing, let them dance, let them act, let them, add something to society. That idea I think is important.
Oh yeah. And I also think that there are big sweeping statements that we can all make, but truly, I think the best, most meaningful change comes in case by case basis. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It really depends on what does accountability look like for that particular person and that particular action in that particular moment. Like, and exactly.
It's not a one size fits all.
It's not a one size fits all.
I just want you to clarify with the Mad Men. Were you talking about the way it portrayed women? Because the show takes place, is it the 50s, right?
Yeah,
like
the early 60s.
Or are you talking about when it was shot, even that nature of, or you're talking about both 60s?
I'm talking about both. So I think that Mad Men in particular, what they did was they showed it like it was, which was women were completely devalued and sexualized in the workplace. Absolutely.
Like doormats, basically.
Total doormat. I mean, God, Joan is one of the most incredible characters, and same with Peggy, the copywriter. So of course she has a special place in my soft heart. But like watching it through the lens now of like, oh, this would get made completely differently to make the same point today than how they did it in 2010. Like, it was a very, very different feeling. So I think it's kind of one of those things that you sort of have to watch it. It's both. It's like, yes, the 60s were horrible for women for many reasons, and they had little to no power or options. You had to get married. If you wanted to be in the working world, you had to act and dress in a certain way, like
be the secretary.
Yes. And like the way that, spoiler alert, but whatever, the show's like 10 years old, the way that the way that Joan makes partner is she sleeps with the ad exec from Jaguar. she like has it in her contract. Like, if I do this, my name is on the door, I make partner. And it is a really fascinating look at what options were available to women at that time, but also shining a light on, well, is it really that different? Like, in some ways, we have to sell ourselves out to make partner still to this day, right? Or we have to like act in a certain way to be respected by our male colleagues or colleagues in the space. And it's getting better, but to the point of Mad Men specifically, like, they also glorify the men's behavior in a way that is uncomfortable to me. So it's not just about the way the women are being treated, it's about the way the men are being celebrated. And that's what's really tough for me to watch.
In the workplace, like when they have wins and like pat each other on the back, that type of thing.
Yeah, but also the characters are very glorified, right? So Don Draper is this anti-hero. You love him. People fucking love John Hamm in that role. He's a sex symbol.
Yep.
Right? So you really have to think like, okay, why in 2010 did I think this behavior was, or did I think like this character was sexy?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
But again, it's just how times change really affects how we look back and watch things, you know?
Exactly. It's all about that time capsule mentality. Like really watching something and being like, you know, it wasn't okay to say the F word in regards to a gay person, but it's in this movie because it's a product of its time.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
how interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's a good kind of segue into the last thing before we wrap is womanhood and where we stand right now. So I know that this is a lot to unpack, but I'm just, because there's so many things coming to a head. It's all very mishmash and it's a mess. So I'm just going to throw out a few things. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So number one, obviously we talked about this, but how unrealistic social media, the filters, the over the top, the plastic surgery, it's getting with younger and younger girls, like the whole Kardashian, and then they pass it all off as real, like that whole thing. Okay. That's number one, like the whole body image thing, versus, you know, just being natural and doing it your way. Also mixed signals, you know, a lot of women feel like with this whole era of like fluid and anyone could be a woman, it's like, I respect you in your decision, but at the same time, like respect biological women in our lane and our experience and what we've had. And now again, with this whole thing of like, well, really in theory, anyone can be a woman. The whole Khloe Kardashian, Tristan Thompson thing, I think is I don't know if you're up to speed on this, but basically this guy has cheated on her like a million times. And while she was pregnant, this whole thing, and we just find out she's having another baby with him via surrogate. And everyone's like, this is not what strong womanhood is about. What are you doing? Maybe it's judgments against her. Okay. Also the idea, I know this is a lot, like I said, but these are all kind of like hot button things right now. Also the idea of like women taking the place of men, that whole idea, instead of being in two respective lanes, that idea of like, I don't need a man, or I'm going to be the man, like that whole thing. And how could we forget the overturn of Roe v. Wade, right? And I did a whole episode on it. Yes. And, you know, women just feeling like what the actual fuck is going on, in terms of our place, our choices. So, you know, our identity. So I know that's a lot going on in this fucking snow globe from hell. But with all of that said, how are you? Is there any one of those topics that strikes a chord with you? How do you, or if you see it from a bird's eye view, where we're going, and, you know, womanhood as it stands right now in the chaos?
Absolutely. Oh, so many thoughts, so many feelings. Okay, let's start with Roe v. Wade. I will forever be of the opinion that even if you are scared of speaking up and speaking out, you should try to speak up anyway. I think a lot of us, especially privileged cis white women, we stay silent on subjects because we think, oh, well, that's not my place, or I don't want it to get messy, or I don't want to get political, quote unquote. But here's the thing, not getting political is no longer an option. Our rights are being
political.
Everything is political. Our rights are being taken away. And here's the thing. Sometimes it takes it getting personal for people to wake up. I believe very much in fighting for trans rights, LGBTQIA rights, Black people's rights, BIPOC rights, because we have to care about other people's rights being protected, because when those people's rights fall, we're next.
Even like the throwing paint on the walls that I just did of all the things going on with womanhood, and where even women in and of ourselves like see things so differently. Yeah. This is what even makes things so convoluted. And I talked about this after looking at the stats in my episode on it, is that more women, first of all, like most of this country agrees that abortion should be accessible within reasonable bounds. That's number one. But number two is that actually women advocate for it to be illegal across the board more than men, which is fucking wild. But it just goes to show you how everything is so messy, like even within the idea of being a woman.
Yeah. Yes. Right? And I think that if I may play therapist for a moment, and I'm going to actually bring this back to acting and some unpacking that I did in my own psyche, my own life, with understanding how deeply I was fucked up in thinking only in terms of what role can I play in the world. Right. So when you're an actor, you get used to plugging yourself into other people's roles that they have for you, other people's boxes. You try so desperately to fit them. Right. And I think that we may be able to use that framework here with the idea of being a woman and identifying with a particular political party or having a particular opinion, because at our core, biologically, humans are wired to want belonging. We are wired to want belonging. And if we're not put in a situation where we examine, why do I have this opinion? Why do I have this thought? 9 times out of 10, I have found in my experience, it's because I was trying to belong or fit a role. And it only was when I got really honest with myself about, well, why do I believe that? Do I really believe that? What other options of beliefs are out there? I can form my own belief system. I don't think it is messy. I think the world is messy, but I think we are actually quite simple. I think it's quite simple to slow down and be like, what do I believe? Why do I believe it really? And how can I advocate in a way that aligns with my values and keeps me sane, keeps my mental health sane? Because if we're all just screaming into the void, then yeah, it is messy. It is really hard to hear ourselves and to hear our intuition and to hear the way that we move forward and make the world a better place. It's hard when we're screaming into the void. It's impossible.
And I love your point about being so tribal. I mean, even with this show, it's why people are like, cannot compute, like their brains explode, because I'll go after both sides. I'll agree with both sides. And because we've become so polarized, people can't seem to wrap. I mean, on one end, they're like, it's so refreshing, but they're like, I can't wrap my brain around it, right? Because we've become so extreme. So
when we are acting from that place of fear, we automatically just want that safety and that belonging. And we just want to talk to people who agree with us because it's so uncomfortable and scary, like biologically survival. Alarm bells go off in our brain, right? We feel like we're literally under attack, which is why if we don't start collectively trying to heal and invite people in to have conversations, and as you said, look at both sides, listen to both sides, understand both sides. Like, I want to talk to someone who feels differently from me so that I can better understand where they're coming from, so that hopefully we can find that common ground and start to heal. Because like, we have to, it's literally life or death.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Kelsey, lastly, given everything that I just kind of laid out and that we talked about, what excites you about being a woman right now?
Oh man. Okay. Musical theater nerd moment. Do you know Hamilton? Do you know the musical Hamilton?
I know it, but
you know of it?
I haven't seen
Okay.
it.
No, it's totally fine. So again, full musical theater nerd over here. There is a line at the in one of the beginning songs called look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. And it's about the Revolutionary War, and they're like in wartime and everything is completely up in the air. They have no idea. Are they an independent country? Are they not an independent country? There's a lot of strife and a lot of political upheaval, and slavery is happening and people are speaking out. And I remember watching that at the time and being like, oh my God, what a mindset shift. Instead of being like, I hate being alive right now, everything is so scary and up in the air, to shift of like, oh my God, how lucky we are to be alive right now. How lucky we are to witness what's happening. What's exciting to me is I am in a time where so many ideas are so easily accessible because of the internet, because of podcasts like this one, because of social media. I can learn so much about people's experience, and I can share my personal experience in a way where I'm much more likely to be heard now. Like, what an amazing gift to live in a time where I have the opportunity to speak out about the things that I care about, especially as it regards being a woman and being a female identifying person. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to be part of the conversation and to put my money where my mouth is and walk the walk.
It's the best. Like, yeah. I don't know about you, but I've just had this awakening lately, and my listeners are a little bit along for the ride, just really stepping into my womanhood. I've always been so proud of being a woman, but just lately, I don't know what it is. It's like the end of the dark, like pandemic and coming, like the butterfly, like the caterpillar shedding into a butterfly.
Absolutely.
In so many ways, like mentally and physically, and taking care of myself and embracing my body and all these things. And guys, like, I love you, but you're missing out, because it is so fucking amazing to be us.
It is amazing. On Wednesdays we wear pink, whatever.
but also, and I want to end it by saying this, not to end on a dark note, but I really appreciate what you just said about how lucky we are to be alive and to be exchanging ideas and to be doing this, because I was just having this thought yesterday, but I feel like the world, it is such sheer chaos and it's such a mess. And I hate when I have these interviews, like I had a junket recently, and, and I feel like people in Hollywood are trained to sugarcoat everything. So they'll be like, I'm grateful for this. Oh, life is good. Yeah. Change is happening. And it's like, okay, we're all like suffering in silence, like not right. Especially right now. And I feel like every day almost I get the news alerts on my phone, for better or worse. And it's a young person dying by suicide. It's a young famous person. It's because people feel so helpless. They look around and they're like, what is the fucking point? Because it's such a sad, chaotic, messy time. And I just want to thank you for really giving people that hope, listening, of saying, hey, we have all of these things, and, we're going to like fucking make lemonade, and there's reason to keep going and to be happy to be alive and for what we have. So I really want to thank you for ending it on that note.
Of course. And I would love to just say that this is a breakupism, but the best revenge is living well. Right. And I feel that politically also, like, the best revenge, if you want to call it that, the best way to stick it to the powers that be that are trying to devalue you and deprive you of your power is to live well and to seek joy and to make shit.
Whatever it is, like, even if you think of like the shitty last 2-3 years, or a breakup or like the people in power or whoever it
Yeah.
is. You're exactly right. It's like owning your own power and confidence. And there is just nothing like it. Like I said, it just gives you this kind of air about you. So Kelsey Formost, all I can say is Hollywood, eat your heart out. You're missing out. Thank you so much. What a joy.
Thank you, Taylor. This was such a fun, interesting conversation. Man, that was great. I love digging deep on stuff. I feel like podcasts are an excuse to get people to have deep conversations with me. So I appreciate it.
It is like my wet dream because this is what I always tried to do in my interviews and on the red carpet and working for like all the, you know, the Vultures Us Weekly. And I could never get, I did, but it was so hard to get there.
Oh yeah. And you don't get the long form conversation like this anywhere else to get to deeper and deeper and deeper digging and diving. So yeah, totally.
I appreciate you for going there. You don't when you were talking, my brain was like, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, which is like my heaven. So thank you, Kelsey, so much. Such a true joy.